Thank you, Gordon. That's a very generous introduction. And it's great to see my good friend and the chairman of the Perth US Asia Center, John Olsen, here as well. And it's great to have the outstanding secretary of our Department of Industry, Innovation and Science, Heather Smith, here. And I know that she's shared her wisdom with you. But I'm also particularly pleased to see Dr. Martin Parkinson here, who, as the Secretary of Prime Minister and Cabinet, provided great leadership in pulling together our work at the federal level when it comes to the critical minerals strategy. I'm mindful of the fact that it is me who stands between you and a drink, and probably not the best time to provide a major closing address, so I'll make a judgment as I go through my prepared remarks as to how much of it I should leave out. But let me just say right up front, thank you so much for inviting me to close this conference. It is obviously a very topical topic that you've chosen for your in-zone conference this year. The strategic imperative for countries across the Indo-Pacific and all around the world, for that matter, to find better ways to secure value chains for critical materials is a great economic opportunity for Australia, and in particular, of course, here in Western Australia, and I know that you would have talked about that extensively all day. In June this year, our government released Australia's first ever critical minerals strategy. It was a clear acknowledgement of the growing importance of critical minerals and rare earth elements, not just as a valued export commodity, or not just as valued export commodities, but as strategically vital components in our modern world. In September, to complement the critical minerals strategy, the Department of Industry, Innovation and Science also released its outlook for selected critical minerals reports, which focuses on the market dynamics and consumption outlook for 6 critical minerals. The strategic and broader economic context is, of course, very important. We have reached a critical point in our world's history. Geopolitical and strategic challenges abound, opportunities abound. Great opportunities, of course, in the context of technological advances which further drive the demand for critical minerals and rare earths. Asia's growth momentum remains resilient. Our broader region has been less affected by financial market turbulence than others. Per capita income across Asia is projected to grow by 5.4% in 2019. Strong economic growth across the Indo-Pacific region over the past decade or more has had important macroeconomic and structural effects on the Australian economy. Australia has been a key provider of the resources and energy commodities required for infrastructure, urban development, first for Japan, then other Asian economies, and most recently China and India. The Indo-Pacific, and in fact the rest of the world's demand for Australia's critical minerals and rare earth elements is expected to keep growing in coming years due to the role of critical minerals in the manufacturing and production of existing and emerging technologies. And as you all know very well, and would have discussed extensively today, they are vital for the technologies of the modern world, used in a range of emerging high-tech applications across a variety of sectors, from renewable energy, aerospace, defense, automotive, particularly electric vehicles, telecommunications, and indeed agri-tech. Yet the supply of most critical minerals and rare earth elements is subject to monopoly market conditions, creating obvious risks when it comes to security of supply. It is in the interest of countries all around the world to develop better value chains and security of supply, and Western Australia, as part of our great nation, is particularly well placed to help support those efforts, in particular across the Indo-Pacific. So during the Prime Minister's recent visit to Washington, as the guest of President Trump, the reliable supply of critical minerals and rare earth elements was an important part of their discussions. In November, Australia and the US will hold further high-level talks between senior government officials to progress a joint US-Australian approach. We agreed to develop a joint critical minerals action plan to bolster the security of rare earth elements and other minerals and to improve the supply chain connectivity between our nations. We agreed to increase the trade in rare earths between our two countries. In fact, President Trump has publicly indicated that the US would source more critical minerals from Australia. We also agreed to further collaboration on lithium-ion recycling with the US, and the increased trade in critical minerals and rare earth elements is obviously a great economic opportunity for Australia, in particular Western Australia, though with a clear strategic dimension. Our government wants to position Australia as a world leader in exploration, extraction, production, and processing of critical minerals and rare earth elements, and processing. Given our impressive and long-standing track record as a reliable supplier of resources and energy commodities, we're very well placed to do so. Our critical mineral strategy targets three areas: promoting investment in Australia, in Australia's critical minerals sector and downstream processing, providing incentives for innovation to lower costs and increase competitiveness, and also connecting critical minerals projects with infrastructure development. In December last year, our government, together with state and territory governments, committed through the coalition of the Council of Australian Governments, the Coalition of Australian Governments Energy Council, to develop a joint work program to harness the emerging opportunities of this critical mineral sector, including for downstream industries. The work that was led at the public service level by Martin Parkinson was really focused on developing a whole of government approach to this very important sector. So we've allocated funding towards a number of initiatives aiming to facilitate investment in critical minerals. In the interest of time, I'm not going to bore you with all of the details, but there's a lot of exciting funding that is going into this sector. But what I would focus on for a moment is perhaps just a couple of investments in terms of infrastructure, because we are investing about $3.5 billion in key transport infrastructure through our Roads of Strategic Importance initiative to support the resources sector, and just to, I guess, demonstrate that there is a real whole-of-government focus in relation to this. About $43.6 million under the Northern Australia Roads Program is directed to update the Marble Bar Road, which will benefit lithium mines and production around Port Hedland. $30.8 million to upgrade sections of the Great Northern Highway to improve access to freight vehicles to and from Wyndham Port. These projects could benefit developments such as the Browns Range Dysprosium project southeast of Falls Creek. $330 million in upgrades to the Outback Way to improve access to underdeveloped critical minerals resources in Western Australia, the Northern Territory, and Queensland along its corridor. The Mount Weld Central Lanthanide deposit is one of the highest grade rare earth deposits in the world and will benefit from this upgrade. Despite some of the challenges and headwinds faced by our lithium industry at present, we do believe that the medium to long-term opportunities for the lithium industry in Western Australia remain very exciting. In 2017, the lithium market value was around $1.4 billion. Australia captured approximately $550 million of this as export revenue with a 33% share of global production. Australia has kept pace to become the world's largest producer of lithium, and our lithium production is more competitive than that from brine production in South America, especially after you take into account the lower costs of conversion to lithium hydroxide and our proximity to demand in Asia. A number of lithium companies operating in Australia are taking up downstream processing to produce a more lucrative lithium hydroxide. And lithium hydroxide is worth almost 20 times more than unprocessed concentrate. Lithium markets have recently become oversupplied as a result of rapid growth in Australian output, with supply expected to exceed demand by about 155,000 tonnes in 2019. More challenging economic conditions and policy changes in China have also had an impact. Overall vehicle sales have been contracting in China for at least a year, and the Chinese manufacturing sector continues to slow. World lithium production ramped up much faster than anticipated in 2018, growing by 22% year on year to 447,000 tonnes. Despite short-term macroeconomic headwinds, overall world lithium consumption continues its rapid growth of recent years, with an expected increase of 21% in 2019 relative to 2018 levels. This growth is primarily supported by increasing electric vehicle sales, expected to increase at an annual rate of over 30%, from 2.9 million vehicles in 2018 to 6.6 million vehicles in 2021. Surging supply has seen the price of lithium hydroxide fall 33% year on year, from about US $18,000 a ton in 2018 to around $12,000 US a ton in 2019. So while production and export volumes are expected to keep increasing, export values hit an estimated record high of $1.4 billion in 2018, but are forecast to fall to $1.8 billion by 2021 due to those lower prices. However, markets are expected to return to balance by 2021. We expect demand for lithium to strengthen over the next 5 years or so, and for supplies to tighten again with the inevitable upward pressure on prices that flows from that. Lithium, of course, should not be our only focus. There are a number of other opportunities that I'm sure you would have discussed at great length during the day today. So I just move to the conclusion. It's essential, and I know that I'm preaching to the choir here, it is essential that we foster and grow the critical minerals and rare elements industry across Australia, in particular here in Western Australia. And having had some feedback about what you discussed during the day today, let me say on behalf of the government that we do understand that notwithstanding strong and strengthening global demand, that the private sector faces challenges securing finance to develop projects, particularly due to the risk profile of greenfield projects and the relative underdevelopment of critical material supply chains. That's why we do accept that market economies such as Australia, and we believe that the same applies to the United States, that in such countries like Australia and the United States, governments must find innovative ways to partner with the private sector to support the necessary industry development. And that is something that through Heather Smith's department, we are pushing quite hard, and we are pursuing those innovative opportunities. I just might mention one that I left out my list before. I mean, we're providing funding of $100.5 million over 4 years to gather geoscientific data about the minerals, energy, and underground water resources potentially in Northern Australia, with data made publicly available to attract future investment in resource exploration development. Through the MinEx Cooperative Research Centre, funding of about $218 million is going into research to develop and deploy the next generation of exploration and drilling technology to enable more cost-effective, safer and environmentally friendly drilling methods in resource exploration and extractions, and a whole range of other things. The major project facilitation agencies working to assist relevant projects in getting off the ground and so on. Given the different endowments, demands, processing and manufacturing capabilities of different countries and industries, effective global partnerships are required to develop sustainable supply chains. And Western Australia is indeed, and I agree with what was discussed here today, is a premier critical minerals resource province with sustainable and efficient mining practices and stable investment, regulations and governance, which is why we are uniquely placed on the doorstep of the Indo-Pacific to reap the economic benefits this growing opportunity presents to us, flowing from a growing global need. This opportunity is not only confined to the production and supply of the raw materials, but we should continue to develop and claim our part in the downstream processing of these strategically important materials. Australia has an important role to play in establishing a secure supply chain for critical minerals and rare earth elements. It's important for us economically, and is important for many of our friends around the world, in particular in our region, strategically. So we will continue to work with all our international partners and all relevant public and private sector stakeholders to unlock the full potential this exciting industry represents for Australia and for the world. And with those few remarks, it is my pleasure to close your conference, and I gather drinks are served.